I tiptoed in a room. I know she's got to have a rest. Come on, we got it. Okay. Welcome to 1000 Ways to Be a Champion for Children. My name is Alan Friesen. Let me tell you about what this show is about. We want to let you know about adverse childhood experiences. We want to encourage you, if you are an adult survivor of trauma that you experienced in your youth, we want to encourage you to readdress that, heal that, find somebody to assist you with resolving that. We also want to share with you any best practices we might have about keeping yourself healthy. These are very unusual, unconventional times, uncertain times, and any tools, tips that we have that might assist you in having the best mental health possible and the best lives possible. My guest today is Andrew McKenzie. Andrew McKenzie is a talented practitioner in the neurosequential model. Andrew, tell us about that.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm a clinical counselor on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and I practice several modalities, but the main one that I've been grounded in for quite a long time and that I base pretty much all of my practice on is a neurosequential model, which is Dr. Bruce Perry's model, senior fellow at the Child Trauma Academy and Neurosequential Network down in the States. And there's so many things we could say about the model, and there are a lot of really helpful core concepts in working with people of all age ranges who have experienced early life adversity, and how to approach kind of therapeutic kind of avenues with people who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, as you're saying. And I've worked with kids in the school system for 14 years. I worked one-on-one with kids in the school system as an educational assistant years before I was a clinical counselor, and worked with the kids that in our school you would call the at-risk kids. And it's really interesting how the understanding of what it was that these kids were really challenged with changed so much over the 14 years that I was in the school system. That's a whole other tangent I could go off on. But so working with a lot of these kids, really youth, and then or actually kids all the way from kindergarten up to middle school kids. And then as I got into this clinical work as a counselor, I work with a team on Vancouver Island here called Pathways to Healing Partnership. We're part of the Child Development Association here in the Comox Valley. And we've gone through a few manifestations, but for the last little while, we've really found our place in supporting vulnerable moms who are pregnant in the perinatal period. So at any time during pregnancy, and usually up until around the first year postnatal. And these are moms who pretty much, across the board, there's been a history of some sort of trauma or early life adversity. Often substance use may be a factor, or kind of underlying mental health challenges. And so we really focus our work on supporting these moms during this time, because one thing that really is the most critical thing if we want to support the development of the children is supporting the ability of the parents to be the parents that they want to be. And that's something that's really lacking, and there are a lot of barriers to that in our systems, in our society.
Being a parent, if like everything is good in life, being a parent is hard work. Wouldn't you agree? So then if you got all kinds of challenges in terms of, you're stressed out, you're not able to learn, relationships are hard to deal with, you've got maybe substance abuse disorders or other pre-existing health type things that are getting in the way of that, man, that makes that considerably harder, right? So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. On both of your points, sir. I agree. Number one, that being a parent in any situation can be the most fulfilling, but it's the most challenging job in the world as well. And most likely because we care about doing that job so much. I've got 5 daughters, so I've been through the ropes on that one. I'm still parenting. I got some older and I've got some younger at home here still. So uh, and I'm also an adoptive parent, so I've come to parenting in many different ways, and kind of had a really diverse experience in that, which has been incredible insight, and incredibly fulfilling as well. But the other part to what you're saying is, when we think about a parent who is struggling with vulnerabilities, whatever those may be, if somebody is living with what is kind of happened inside them as the outcomes of early traumatic experiences, um, and some systems can just really have a challenge in understanding that. Like number one, if a parent is struggling with something that we know as dissociation, which is early things in life kind of predispose somebody as a way to survive, to kind of check out of the moment they're in, or to kind of disconnect from themselves. Like, that's something they had to do to survive. It's completely understandable. it's
Hmm.
it's a mechanism to get through something. So their brain was doing exactly the right thing when this really challenging thing was happening for them to survive this. Later on, at 30 years old, having their first child, just as an example, um, when things get stressful, sometimes maybe it isn't the most adaptive function, if we're getting stressed out, to be kind of tuning out, or to to not be present in themselves, if if something is getting too challenging, or too hard. And where we see this, what I've seen quite a few times is, in working with different systems around parents, there can just be this huge misunderstanding. And I'm going to pick on dissociation. There can be just a huge misunderstanding of what this means when a parent is struggling with this. And that's why we feel like in our team that we really work with our clients to educate the systems around them, to try to understand what some of the barriers and challenges may be. So, a parent can be perceived all sorts of different ways, that, we're not committed to the process. You're not really paying attention in this really incredible team meeting with, five of the most important kind of players in the community around you. And there can be a lot of really negative misunderstandings of this thing, which is inherently a survival mechanism that is carried over to a time when maybe it isn't needed, or it's kind of preventing the client from doing what they kind of want to be doing. But it's there, and it's not a choice they're making to kind of do this. And
Andrew, just to
yeah,
clarify, when you're
yeah,
like, I know that the classic example of a dissociative response, if I understand it correctly, is where, let's say, a woman is raped, and then because her attacker is stronger and more powerful and weighs 50 pounds more than her, it's going to happen. There's nothing she can do to prevent this, and her body then produces, like, dumps a whole bunch of endogenous opioids to kind of protect her from that pain, right? That's the response you're talking about, but just that it reoccurs in maybe a less threatening situation, but it's just that pattern starts again, kind of a thing. Am I understanding it fairly close?
really, really good reflection. And yeah, absolutely. That's and what you really described is, through Dr. Perry's work, looking at the idea of sensitization of the stress response. And so, for example, the person you're talking about, and that is something, clinically, that we see really almost pervasively in survivors of, female survivors, especially, of sexual abuse. And, so we're in a situation like you described, where something's overwhelming, fight, flight, or freeze don't work. And so the only thing that our brain can kind of figure out to do is to remove us from experiencing that situation. Like you said, yeah, there are opioids that we're flooded with that are 20 times more powerful than the morphine drip that you're given in the hospital when you go in for a broken arm or something. So if you can imagine somebody being in that place, there can be such a gross misunderstanding of, somebody. Then to us, that's really one of the biggest disparities in understanding, is that there's a lot of interpretation of the challenges and the way these manifest in the parents as being willful and decisions they're making.
Right,
When, if you
right.
think about your stress response, like if something, if all of a sudden a car crashed through your studio right now, you wouldn't be able to help it if your heart rate jumped up to 140 beats per minute. It's not a choice you're making. But that's where some of the challenges come in, is there being this misinterpretation. And then the other kind of secondary thing that can happen which can become more of a primary trauma, is this stigma that the parents feel. And a lot of times that can come, I've found, from misunderstanding themselves and kind of believing a lot of these judgments that they felt throughout their lives, like, oh, you're a space cadet, you don't pay attention, you're not reliable, you lose track of time, picking on dissociation again. And so when I've talked with a lot of parents, for the first little while and talked about some of these things, a lot of them have said that they found it really kind of liberating to kind of understand a little bit more about, gee, you know what, like, I'm not a bad person. I'm not like not trying hard enough. I just have had things happen that have helped my brain develop in the way it had to at the time, but it's not really, it's a little bit out of place in the way that it's responding to the environment right now. So there,
and it's sort of Andrew, an extension of kind of the trauma-informed care. Now you're going to the caregiver, which some people would judge that person as, well, they don't care, or they're just like, this doesn't matter to them, right? This isn't important to them. Not kind of connecting that that person is doing their very best they can in that situation. This is just, where they're at, kind of a thing, right? So yeah, I can see where that would be, they'd be judged for something that isn't even apparent, that they can't really be there, be present for. Being present is a huge problem for people who've been traumatized, correct?
it can be, depending on the person and their individual experience, and the way, the way that their brain adapted to survive at the time, and how, it's kind of all about the pattern, the timing, and the repetition, and the time and development that it happens. But yeah, it has been for a lot of people that we've worked with. It's almost like this separation from the self, and then this separation from the moment, that can end up happening for a lot of people that they've described that to me, and I've experienced it kind of with them while they've had it happening. So yeah, and that stigma can be just such an ongoing battle. And to me, that, you said the idea of kind of trauma informed care or understanding, we really feel like that's kind of the battle to wage, if you will, in a lot of the systems out there. And people are really excited and really willing and wanting to learn this, because they end up feeling more competent and able to provide care in the way that they want to in different systems. So
Yeah.
that's the exciting part of it.
Yes. No kidding. The trauma informed, or pardon me, no. The neurosequential model. Did you and I meet at the neurosequential model and wisdom of the elders that was with Shelley Spearchief and Dr. Bruce Perry? Is that where we met?
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
we met. We were chatting about some things on the side there. I think I was making some offhanded, well, offhanded sounds negative, but some on the side, physically on the side of the computer, comments about ways that we'd worked to kind of find these kind of like auxiliary healthy relationships for some of the youth that we were working with. And this is when our program did also work, like, we've always worked with whole families. And so if there's a mom and baby we're working with, then, we do our work in a systems level. You can't just, take a 4-year-old kid and say, like, gee, it looks like you're struggling with ADHD. We're going to do this, that, and the other. No, like, you really need to look at what's going on in the family system. And so if there's a mom and baby, then we're working with the 2 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds or the 15-year-old that's there as well. So we have kind of, and another part of the neurosequential model is really looking at finding multiple attuned, responsive adults to be, and that's kind of, I like how that kind of coincides with the name of your show, like 1,000 Ways to Be a Champion. Well, you kind of need to have like a tribe of people around any kid or any person to be able to provide these therapeutic experiences. And that's one of the other premises of the NMT, is that they happen throughout like a group of people. It's not just sitting in a room with, me as your counselor 1 hour a week necessarily, although that can be a great part of it. It's really with other people too.
Yeah. And I think you would agree with this. Like, there is just not enough professional capacity to address the, people who are dealing with trauma, or people who are experiencing violence. They're just not enough professionals in order to do that work. And I think that's what my hope is that to kind of backfill these relationship deficits that a lot of young people have, that a lot of kiddos have, that we can have just caring adults who have enough understanding that they can support, encourage, help, just listen, whatever it is, that they've got these steps that they can do that are going to be of value for those kiddos, and actually even, perhaps augment or accelerate any of professional services that they are in receipt of as well, right? That just to be able to, hey, you know what, there's this other caring adult who saw me, heard me, acknowledged me, encouraged me. That just those, even if it's a one-off, it has value. Would you agree?
100,000% agree. That was really emphatic of me, but
Very much so.
and really that comes out a lot, from a few places. One of the places is the work I did in the school district here for a long time, having the privilege of working one-on-one with kids who their first and a lot of their experiences with relationships were negative. So they had, in many ways, a very negative template of what a relationship was, in many cases of what a relationship with a man was, and how that is a negative thing. A lot of survivors of intimate partner violence in the family, all kinds of things that could be really challenging for development. And so I really saw through that. I've worked with some kids for 5 or 6 or 7 years even, and really stayed with one child, and could see that really in these micro interactions I felt that were happening, just in this case with a man, what I'm used to is that there might be somebody who would be irate or judgmental or non-accepting, but then in this case, in this micro interaction with another adult at the school, there's validation, there's acceptance, and there's a completely different experience. And so that's little by little in an ongoing way. I really saw that that's how the brain could change. And that's why the NMT was such a good match for me when it came along. And fast forward 10 more years, I see some of these folks around town or I see their parents, and they say like, gee, that really made a big difference, being, having your involvement. And I'm always kind of surprised. I was talking about this with my colleague Jan Ferentz the other day. Then we worked in the school for many years. We work together now still. She's the director of our program, and we were both saying, yeah, we get these gifts some days where a parent will come back, or a child, and they'll say like just how much it meant to work with you. So yeah, when you talk about other people being involved, it's really critical to have those, because yeah, you're right. Number one, the system just doesn't have the capacity to have everybody in a room with a counselor all the time.
Exactly. And as you know from that Wisdom of the Elders and Bruce Perry's discussion in there with Shelley Spearchief, the traditional Indigenous ways, with the number of caregivers per little person, right? And the whole, here are the steps of your development. These are the things you will learn throughout and at, age 4, you're a member of the, whatever it is, the Prairie Chicken Society. And, these kind of steps in your development, so that at the end of that period of time, you're like a fully functioning human being for that tribe, right? You're there, you care, what your role is, how you're going to make a difference. Right. And I mean, that doesn't exist. I know, I understand that, but I think that we can simulate some of that by creating other activities that other caring adults have some capacity, sometimes some energy to participate. So I'm trying to find ways and trying to find people who want to do that. I'll be one, but I want to find a whole bunch of other people that say, oh, here's how I can make a difference. I understand this. I can make a difference here in this child's life, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, as an example, we started a thing called Rotary Ready, Set, Drive. All right. All it is helping kids study so that when they write their driver's test, they can pass it. So the value in it, though, I think, is that, okay, we are assisting those kids. We are adults who are they're going to know, okay, well, here's somebody who cares about my future and they want to spend a little bit of time with me to make this happen. Great. If they are successful, which they will be, we're certainly hoping, well, then they're going to have more opportunities in their life. They're going to have employment opportunities. They're going to have social opportunities. If they, get a driver's license, even if they can't afford a car, just having a driver's license is an asset, right? But the next thing I'm hoping after that, are you familiar with the Man Box? You know all about the Man Box, I'm sure, right? Yeah, Next Gen Men and Next Gen Men and Call to Men. Are you familiar with these guys?
I'm not familiar with that. No.
Oh, I think this is a big part of the solution. And basically it is just that we as men, and you different than me, I'm older than you are. So, but we were conditioned to have thoughts about females, and the thoughts kind of earlier on, like the farther back you go, the more entrenched this is. Now it's perhaps less so, but it's still there. The fundamental things are women are somehow less, women are somewhat property, and women are sexual objects. Those kind of three things that are part of the man box. And the other part of the man box is men don't ask for help. Men are strong. Men don't have emotions, right? And so it's just, having, I think that's something that really impairs, maybe not yours, because you're a more enlightened being than I am. It impairs my ability.
Well, don't go too far.
Okay, all right. It impairs my ability, or has in the past. I'm aware of it now, so I think it has less. But the whole thing about microaggressions, my friend and colleague with Rotary, Kim Davis, was kind of counseling me once on microaggressions. I didn't understand what she was talking about, but after hearing it about 5 times, I finally figured out what she meant. But it's those kind of comments that frame in a way that says somehow that women are less, right? So that's, I find that, I think, a huge part, that if we can connect with young like boys in our community and have these conversations about, hey, what do you think about, like, what is your experience? What is your understanding of how, men and women are different? And the same thing with the whole man box is then how that's very much a patriarchal, heterosexual box. So if you're outside of that box, if you're, two-spirit, or you are, I don't know if that's the right way to use that term, but I think so, two-spirit, or you're LGBTQ, those kind of things. Well, yeah. And of course, the man box is normally white too, right? It's white, heterosexual.
I think you raised a lot of good points there, and come to think of it, I think I may have heard the term man box in a meeting I was at a few weeks ago, which is around, I actually run a group for dads here on Vancouver Island as one of the parts of our program. And yeah, a lot of conversation reflectively comes up around these kind of preconditioned societal expectations of us as men. And there's the expectations of us, and then there's that which we embody as well, that you bring up, and that which we're kind of carrying forward multi-generationally with regard to our inner sort of template about what we think, femininity or womanhood is, or and how we act accordingly as well. So I think the other part of what you said there, the idea of you working with a youth as a mentor, as somebody in their lives, you can have conversations, but really just the modeling, really the indirect kind of parallel interaction of being together and somebody seeing a different experience of what it might be maybe you go to a drive-through after you do your driver's practice, and they see you have an interaction with a female who's providing service to you, or you have some other interaction with a female, and a child who maybe from a different life experience gets to experience you having a different experience with a female, which is maybe more positive, respectful, based on equality, and isn't embodying any of those negative kind of norms.
Yeah, we're always an example, right, Andrew? Whether we're planning on being what or not, we're an example.
For better or for worse.
For better or worse, exactly. I just put up a little resource guide. We're having a conversation that this might trigger for something for you. This might make you feel a little uncomfortable. If you feel that you need to reach out for help right now, here's some numbers that are help right now. Okay. So yes, I think that's, one thing that happened during this pandemic thing, Andrew, is that I said, hey, you know what? I'll try being a big brother, big sister thing, a big brother. I'll try being a big brother, and I'll do it for 3 months on a virtual basis, because I got time for it. Right. And then now it's like, okay, this is good. I enjoy this, and I'm being of value to this kid. Right. So, because I can see so much of me at that age, except for he's a better kid than I was at his age. But other than that, I can see so much of me there. And I know how much a little bit of guidance for me at that time would have been so helpful. And it's not that I had bad parents. I just my dad really didn't have a clue what he was doing. And my mom was a mom taking care of, whatever. we had kids. I do know how many siblings I have, but we also had foster kids as well. So it was a pretty busy household, right? So, yeah.
It sounds busy. So part of your experience and is is being able to be that role model for and being able to have that relational connection with this youth where you possibly didn't have the same opportunity, and also part of it sounds like re-experiencing in a way what you would have envisioned wanting for yourself during that time.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, I think that as well. And I'm trying to just be. I know there's sometimes I'm not a good example, but because of my need for acceleration and speed, sometimes that's not a good thing to show as a role model. But I just say, this isn't the right way to do this, but it is a fun sensation. So sensation, the speed, the acceleration. So if there's a safe way to do it, maybe it's okay. But
sounds like you're modeling some reflection in there too.
I am. I would never even think about it in the past, but now I'm like, oh yeah, really? Am I doing the right thing here? So, and here's also, we have other resources that I linked on my website there, on my YouTube channel, I should say. And then there's all the past episodes of this. So I'll just leave that up for a couple minutes. Yes. So I think why I was saying with the big brother, big sister thing, that's a more formal, that's a longer term thing. But the difference you can make if you had 2 hours a week, that you're gonna, or an hour a week that you could spend doing something, showing, even if it's by a Zoom, and showing them how to run a chainsaw or to carve something out of wood, or here's how you weld, or what I mean? Those kind of things are ways that we can make connections, and maybe those connections will be of value at a later date when, Sarah or Sam, whoever you helped, then, kind of has to wants to reach out to somebody because, let's say, they're experiencing violence. And then you say, you know what, I'm so sorry to hear that you're going through that. I want to keep you safe. What can we do right now? Are you safe right at this moment? Right. So I think there's some connection there. And that's maybe an extreme example, but we all make a huge difference in people's lives, even that we don't even understand that we have done it sometimes, just with a simple act of faith or love or encouragement. I think we make huge differences, as you've experienced with your parents and clients, where 20 years later they say, Andrew, you made a difference in our lives, right? That's huge.
Well, yeah, exactly. And when the damage, all trauma is happening in the context of a relationship. And when that's early, ongoing kind of developmental trauma, which has, a different impact than, a person that's had a really, fairly, well kind of attuned upbringing and didn't have those early life adversities, but, gets into a horrible car crash someday. There are different things. And when somebody has had that damage in a relationship, it takes relationships to heal that later on. And I just wanted to, do I have time to speak to like 2 points that you made that I kind of wanted to double validate you here. I think that you're talking about like revving chainsaws and doing things with kids. And I think that in all the work that I've done with kids I worked with, I always, in the school, I was always saying like, wow, like so many of these kids I work with are like, they're really good skateboarders and they love doing skateboarding, or like they're the best mountain biker in town. And I did a lot of skateboarding when I was a kid. Heck, I still skateboard a little less these days because I notice the injuries aren't quite as forgiving. But I started in the schools when we had an opportunity, taking the kids out to do things like skateboarding or hiking. We did a lot of stuff in nature. And there are 2 things that later on the NMT really validated me in my approach about that. One of them is this concept called the intimacy barrier, which is looking at when a lot of times people have early negative relational experiences, then it's going to be not quite as it can be much more of a casual interaction that this kid can find triggering. And I noticed this by working in an alternate school at one point, where I went up and I wanted to be my best self and connect with kids. And I'd say, hey, how are you doing? Like, like, what's your name? And like, let's get to know each other. And they weren't having it. They were like, who are you, buddy? Like, where do you get off? And it just was, it was too direct. It was too unfamiliar. And I probably represented a template that was somewhat threatening. So they're saying like alarm bells going off. Whereas this child over here, I can sense this between kids now, will be a lot more, engaging, and maybe, hey, like, seem a lot more comfortable. So by doing what you're doing, where you're talking about doing physical activities or teaching somebody something, can be a more parallel interaction where we're not quite as face to face as and I are here when we're, on these Zoom meetings and staring each other down. You can be side by side with someone, and it can be less relationally threatening that way, more manageable for someone who has certain adversities in their past. And then the other part of what you said, doing the physical activity, regulation and things like rhythm and movement are hugely interrelated, as you probably learned with your dive into the NM as well. So those things both work really well together. If we can do things that are parallel and physical in nature, those can be a great combination, to kind of working and kind of healing a relationship with somebody.
Andrew, I got to tell you one thing, that after reading Dr. Perry's book, and like, for all the trauma, the horrendous thing that happened to those kiddos in that book, right? The treatments, besides just like love and attention, but the treatments of music and movement were so prevalent in every recovery, right? So in my little brain, I say, well, if that's a good thing for recovery, it sure as hell it's got to be good for prevention. So I have actually navigated away from my normal exercise routine, because all I do is dance in the morning and sing in the afternoon. So and that's it. And it's been phenomenally good for my health, my weight, my mental capacities. Like, it's been really, really good. But if I can just back up for 1 second, where you're talking about the little kiddo, the direct approach, and it's like, ooh,
Yes.
they don't. My wife, who's very, very astute about people who have experienced trauma, relates them as well. She's a very sensitive person, relates them to horses, because she's a horse expert. She's very, very knowledgeable about horses. But horses are prey animals, so they're always on the alert, right? And if you're going to approach a horse, you don't walk directly up to them. Basically, you kind of walk towards their shoulder, and you don't touch their face first. You're going to stroke them on the shoulder. So there's a protocol that the animal feels comfortable in that environment, right? That you're not overly stressing them, and they kind of have a little bit of a trust. It's kind of a trust building exercise to even approach the horse, right? So she knows how to do it intuitively. I don't. She has to coach me. So, go, slower, and she has to walk me through it. But that's just kind of where those kids who have been traumatized, that's their world, is everything's a threat, right? Everything's gonna hurt or be a painful experience for them, is how they will start to perceive the world if that's their experience, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, you definitely brought up a couple really interesting things there. Yeah, absolutely. Like those, as I was saying about templates and having a sensitized response to stress, experiences can just put somebody into a state of fight or flight or dissociation a lot more quickly and easily than it may be for somebody who hasn't had those early, really challenging experiences they had to survive through. And there's just this larger zone of tolerance or distress tolerance, if you will, for the person that had the more attuned, predictable, kind of well-organized upbringing than the person who's survived a lot of early developmental trauma. And so, yeah, there will be a lot more things that, I can think of a student I worked with at the school where there was a certain Christmas carol. Whenever that came on, this kid went through the roof.
Oh.
And there are a couple of things. They were in a crowd of kids. I don't think that was working for this child. They had all huddled together and sing a Christmas carol. But this particular carol came on, and this child just was really triggered by it. And I was always hypothesizing, I wonder what was co-occurring when this Christmas carol was playing earlier in this child's life. Like, what is that wired along with? And so we found an alternate sort of way that this child could be doing something else while this was happening with me in a healthy relationship still. But that's once again where a lot of misunderstanding can take place. Like, you don't want to be part of the group. You are being oppositional. You're not listening to me, but really we need to listen to the child in that case.
Right. Yes.
So,
yeah. That's that. Yeah. I know. I haven't read it, but maybe you have that Bruce Perry and Oprah book about what happened to you. It's not like, why, what is it? It's not why are you like that, but what happened to you, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure who quoted it. It's a quote. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. yeah, I'm still getting there, and I have it on Audible ready to roll. Strangely with COVID, I don't have a lot of my regulating driving time that I often had before, so my reading
Yes.
list is suffering.
My reading
It's fun.
list is my reading list is pack it up, is stack it up. I got books on books on
Yeah.
books, stack it up. And then I get in something. I started taking that course, that Wisdom of Trauma by Dr. Gabor Mate. Are you familiar with that? It just like it
I
launched last
just
week.
watched it last night.
So I watched the movie, and then there's like, I don't know, 40 different interviews that are part of it, kind of a thing, like a little course and 40 interviews. So I'm working through those materials. But one thing that he stressed that I'm sure you have a huge agreement with is about the disconnection with self, right? That trauma creates a disconnection with self. And with that disconnection with self, it also cuts you off from intuition, from imagination, from just a feeling of safety, right? From your neocortex, right? Where all your executive functions are. Like that disconnection, I'm sure it's a varying degree of disconnection, and the neurosequential model, it would also be very it could be very specific types, as in this trigger you're talking about with this young man at the Christmas concert, right? But how did you enjoy the movie?
I thought it was excellent. Yeah, it was. I'm actually gonna probably have to give it a rewatch because there was a lot packed in there. I've appreciated a lot about the work of Gabor and his. If you haven't had a chance to read his books, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, When the Body Says No, or Scattered Minds, definitely worth checking out. Yeah, there was so much in that movie. I think one of his big messages around the disconnection from the self is huge, and it's interesting. It can happen on so many levels, like the physical disconnection from ourselves when you think about somebody literally dissociating. And I had a client once draw me a painting. They traced their body and then drew me a painting and painted different colors of all the different shades of where they felt like this isn't part of my body, or I don't recognize this, or this is numb. And it really, to me, that really was an incredible insight into the deep level of disconnection that people, survivors, can feel. And then there's also that on other levels, emotional disconnection from other people because we don't feel safe in relationships at this point. Or it could be disconnection on a moral and a moral level, feeling like there's a society that we feel alienated by, and that there isn't, our story doesn't match the story of what is expected in society, because of either where we've come from or what our experience is right now. So yeah, disconnection is a huge theme, and alienation that I've seen in all the people I've supported.
Yeah, I bet. And connection, your degree of connection that you have personally is going to kind of dictate the degree of connection you can have with anybody else, right? Sort of like compassion and love, the same kind of things, right? You can only give of how much you have. Does that make sense to you? That's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And also knowing ourselves too. If we're going in thinking about what is this person struggling with, what are their triggers, you'd better know what your triggers are. And that's something I think all of us. Oh, I think my dog has something to say too.
Exactly.
gotta love this new Zoom culture. I think it's an ongoing journey learning about ourselves, but as we get older, learning about what some of those things were in our childhood, what our adversities were we survived, how those impact us right now, how we've resolved them or not, and especially how are these things going to come up with us when we're in relationship with another people, especially our clients. Because if you have things like projection or countertransference going on, like those can get really, really messy if you're not aware of what's coming up in you that someone else is bringing up. If there's something someone else has lived through and we've lived through something similar, but we're not aware that that's something that's impacting us in that moment, it can be challenging. So yeah, really, really good points.
Yeah, and I think it's super valuable for any of us to look back and just reflect on our childhood. Were there times when we felt scared, or we felt worthless or hopeless or helpless? Were those times? And just kind of have a little review of that. I've known some, and I think that well, no, it often happens that the child, and this is Gabor Mate's thing, right? The child always believes they're at fault, right? That they're the problem. And so with that disconnection of themselves, that they're not enough, that there's something wrong with them. If they maintain that thought through their whole life, that's got to make life a lot tougher for them, right? And in my case, I haven't even had trauma. Like I was kind of questioning myself, why am I so interested? Why do I want to engage and work on this? Like, there must be some kind of trauma that I forgot, or so I'm pretty sure not now that I've thought this through, but I have had self-limiting beliefs about myself based on conversations that I had with my mother when I was a little person. And I believe that for that decades later, I believe my worth was less because of that conversation. And it was such a small thing. I didn't get hit. I didn't, there wasn't, but it's any of those kind of things disconnected from my value to myself or my worth, how I perceive myself and my worth. So if you address that and you resolve it, you're able to move forward with that, either individually, like with the help of a therapist, or in combination. That's a valuable process for any of us, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and about that. And what it sounds like you're talking about is like really early invalidation, or an invalidation is a huge theme in a lot of challenges that people are struggling with mental health wise later on in life. And early invalidation, as you're saying, if there's if the child, as Gabor says in his movie, if the child believes that the adult is at fault, then that's a lack of safety. That's my caregiver being unsafe. So I have to take that on. And that means that I'm, either worthless or unlovable. And I'll tell you, across the board, in all the cases I've worked with in child protection, where kids have been being removed, and there have been attempts at reconciliation and replacing with the family and working with families, the parents really remain blameless most of the time with the kids, and kids don't really start to reconcile and be able to look critically at that until they're a lot older, because younger kids, they just need their parents to be the all-powerful, all-knowing parents, and so they do take on a lot of that blame and shame themselves.
Right, exactly. And, just going back and thinking of that, this happened. Oh, I remember this happened. Why do I remember that? Right. And if there's the thought there somehow that you were less because of that counter, that 20 seconds or that 5 minutes or whatever that had happened, that's decades later, I think it's time to revisit that. Right. I know I really love that. It's an old book, John Bradshaw's Homecoming, or you might be familiar with it. It's basically the thing in the book is to remember this happened when I was around 6. Okay, adult Alan is going to go back to 6-year-old Alan and kind of pick him up and give him a hug and say, buddy, this is okay. Nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. You okay. Your mom was having a tough day, but you're all right. So, that kind of a thing, which and maybe it sounds a little hokey, but I think there's still value in it. The awareness is a value, right? So.
Well, that's, if you're at a place now where you're in a reflective healing journey, and you have the power to validate the child in you that experienced that. So that's, yeah, that is something in therapy that can really work for people.
Compassion fatigue is a real thing. The work you do is hard work, Andrew. How do you keep yourself healthy? What are your best practices for keeping you?
Well, the best practice is try to practice what I preach. And I joke about this with my dads at my dad's group. I say, okay, come on, like, I'm the counselor. I gotta walk the talk, right? So, honestly, I work on being really connected as much as I can with my family and friends and the people around me. I work hard at really, really being in the micro interactions I'm in with people in the biggest way that I can. And capitalizing on those, because the biggest parts of relationships can happen in the smallest interactions, and that's a really good thing to remember. It can just take a Milla interaction to have a profoundly positive impact on people. And so I really focus on that with my family and my kids, and then I like to do a lot of surfing, and I guess that isn't a big thing in Alberta, or maybe who knows, right? Technology's on the rise, but I do a lot of surfing and I do a lot of things outdoor, and I feel like connection to nature is a really important part of what kind of heal through. So I work on those things, and I definitely try to make sure I give myself the time to be available and whole to do this kind of work. Because you're right, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we have no business kind of doing this kind of work.
Yes. Yes. Are you a regular meditator?
You know, I try. I'm gonna openly own that I really work at mindfulness and I believe in it and I practice it. And it's it's a work in progress for me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's you know, working doing things like body scans, or kind of estimating the amount of time that passes, or estimating when a minute is has gone by. It's I think I'm like a lot of people in our society where you know, what does John Kabat-Zinn call it? Striving. It's hard to not strive, like we're conditioned to live in the next moment or in the past. And so being in the present is kind of really foreign for a lot of us. And I'm working at that. So I
Right.
try.
And if I'm not trying to say that I have this, but if, if you're not worried about what's going to happen in the future, and you're not in a place where there's any regrets about the past, you're in this moment right now, and you're not in pain, you're not hungry, you're not, you have no physical needs that aren't, all your physical needs are being met. You're sated and you're in this moment. It's a pretty beautiful space, right? It could be like it's the place to be, right? It's so you can enjoy every second that's elapsing, like right now, right? So, and then
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and then the other things don't matter. What's happened in the future? Well, it'll happen in the future later, and what things happen in the past are nothing to be concerned with anymore. This moment you can just reserve for this moment's pleasure, this life affirming moment that's occurring right now.
I love it. You know, looking at anxiety and depression in really broad strokes, you can look at depression as having a lot of regret or resentment about the past, and then anxiety is that, anticipation of the what if could happen in the future. So it really targets a lot of of the more pervasive kind of mental health challenges people can be living with. There's a neurologist. Researcher from, I believe he's from the University of Calgary, maybe I think his name's Frank McMaster, and he's come to quite a few of the neurosequential symposiums in Banff. And when we were talking to him after one of his presentations, he was saying that from his perspective, some of the most effective sort of treatment for any sort of mental health condition is in the mindfulness sort of realm. So it can really have a deep impact. I use it a lot with my clients. I do it with them, and it can be really great for especially the types of experiences people can harbor through early trauma that really do reside in the body somatically.
Yes. You know what? We went a little longer, and I was going to keep you. Sorry about that,
Well,
Andrew. I was quite engaged in the conversation. So
that's okay. Likewise.
I'm going to put this thing up one more time, this little screen share. And then are there any like closing thoughts that we should share with folks? Any other words of wisdom that you could say? Oh man, if people don't know this, they need to.
Darn, if there was I would have probably tried to write something down ahead of time if I knew there was a little poignant word of wisdom at the end. I would just say stay close to the people you love, and never underestimate the power of relationships to heal, and don't underestimate the positive impact you're having in the work that you're doing and the people that you're with in your life.
I mean, Andrew, you think about it. Let's say every exchange we have, the exchange that you and I are having right now, let's say that it was a life affirming experience for us, that we left and we felt, more joy, more peace, more love, more gratitude. That'd be a pretty beautiful place to live, right?
I think so. And I think it's been a really great conversation. And I think that, and that's where good work is done. So,
Andrew, I thank you for your time. Keep yourself well, my friend, and we'll talk to you in the future.